Welcome back to my sewing room. I'm Kelly and you found me here on Pick and Stitches. And today I'm going to walk you through another fast and easy, beginner friendly, fat quarter free pattern. So let's jump right on in. Let me show you how it goes together. Okay guys, this is the quilt that we're going to be making today. It takes 16 fat quarters. I sewed it out in Mary All the Way. This is a fabric by Connecting Threads. I think there's 14 fat quarters in the bundle. You need 16. So I did have to supplement with 2 fat quarters out of my stash, but this came together super fast and it is perfect for Christmas and it will show off all of your bigger prints. So let's jump right on in. Let me show you how I cut this one out. So I'm going to show you guys 2 different ways to cut this. This is going to be a pretty fast and easy cut for us. The first thing I'm going to do is kind of square up my fat quarter. And so this is just with the standard ruler. I'm just going to line it up and get it square across the top. And then I'm going to rotate my mat here. And we're going to cut off 4 3/4, and we're going to make 3 strips. And this Creative Grits ruler is nice because I've got my 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the half, and I've got one more hash mark, and I can look at it from the top all the way to the bottom pretty easily. So we're going to make 3 strips. I just bump that over a little bit so that I can see my lines. And since this is a non-directional print, it's going to be pretty easy. All of these prints that I have are non-directional. If you have something directional, you may want to pay a little bit more attention there, but okay, so we've got our 3 strips. So this little bit on the end here is going to be extra. Of all of mine, what I'm going to do is just make those into a 3-inch strip that I can use for something else later on. Sorry, a 3.5-inch strip. 3.5. That way it's nice and squared up and ready to go. And then I'm just going to put that in my scrap bin. Okay. Now, since these are really large pieces, I'm going to go ahead and stack them to cut them. I generally am not going to do that, but since these guys are pretty big, I'm just going to work my magic, line them up nice and neat. And I'm actually going to grab a little bit smaller ruler. You can do it with the larger if you need to, but I prefer when I can. I'm going to switch my mat orientation again. Okay, so I'm going to get all my selvages off over here. And then we're just going to cut these into 9-inch sections. So again, you could rotate your fabric. I prefer to just use that mat. And then we're going to cut these to 9. I'm going to line up my bottom edge with the line. And there we go. And you could cut these out more than 1 fat quarter at a time. But as you can see, it cuts up pretty quickly. So these are the pieces we're going to use. We'll sort these into A's and B's in a moment. And then this last little section, I'm just cutting these into 2.5-inch for my scrap bin. Okay. So that's the standard way that we cut up. The other alternative is to use our Stripology ruler. And I was really excited to get to show you guys this ruler in this capacity because we're cutting 3 3/4. And on our ruler guide here, you've got 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch. So I wasn't certain when I didn't have this ruler that you could do it, but you actually can. And it's just going to require us to do a little bit of math. So I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the description for this cheat sheet, which will help you, but you can actually work through the math here. So we're going to start making these 3 3/4. So what we're going to do first is cut at 9 1/2. So if you think about it, 4 3/4 plus 4 3/4 is 9 1/2. And 9 1/2 plus itself is going to put you at 19, which our piece isn't going to be that wide, but that's for future. Then we're going to bump the ruler over a little bit, 1/4 of an inch, and then we're going to go back to our original 4 1/2 line. And since the fabric is kind of hanging off this side, it's going to be 4 3/4. And then we're going to cut between this 9 1/2 and 19, but it'll just be at the 14-inch mark. I hope that makes sense. I want to kind of explain that a little bit more just so that if you don't have this cheat sheet or can't find this cheat sheet, you can work through the math. But, you know, cheat sheets are always the easiest method. Easiest method. Easy for me to say. Okay. So first I'm going to take my fat quarter. This is the lengthwise because it won't fit in the ruler that way. And I'm going to fold it in half and get a nice even seam. And then I'm going to take my stripology ruler and I'm going to make sure that this 0 line is not hanging off the fabric. And I'm going to line up with my fold one of the lines on my ruler. So I'm covering the 0 a little further and I've got this lined up. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim off the 0 line. And then our chart, it says the first cut that I'm going to do is way over here at 9 1/2. So that's our first 2 strips essentially. So I'll come over to 9 1/2, cut it there. And then if we had enough length of this piece of fabric and we had 19, we could get one more cut, but we don't have that big because I'm working with the fat quarter. So then I'm going to take off my ruler. I'm going to take off this little trimming that I did, and then I'm going to place my ruler back. But instead of lining up with the 0, I'm going to line up with this very first dotted line, which gives me that extra 1/4 inch. So now I'm with that extra 1/4 inch line. So now when I come back and cut 4 1/2, it's actually giving me that extra 1/4 inch that I need. So I'm going to cut it at 4 1/2. And then I'm going to cut it again at 14. Okay, so now I've got my 3 pieces that we're going to subcut. This was that little piece of leftover. For my scrap bin here, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it to 3 1/2. So I'll line it right back up, 3 1/2. All right, that's ready for the scrap bin. I'm going to take those same 3 pieces just like we did last time, and I'm going to line them up with a line on my ruler or my cutting mat. Okay, so then get that to line up with a line on my ruler. Make sure the 0 has coverage, and then I'm going to trim it at 0. And we want our pieces to be 9 inches, so this is easy. We're going to go 9 and 18. And now I've got both sets cut. So that's 2 different ways to do it. And I know there was a lot of talking in there and a lot of explaining, so okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and cut my background squares, and I'm going to do that with the same stripology ruler. Now I did have to fold this fabric more than once. So when you fold it more than once, you want to pick a line on your mat and get lined up with the top fold and make sure that your bottom fold feels like it's in line. And this one does not. So if I were to cut it right now, that's when you're going to get those weird wonky dog legs. And that is not what we want. We want to cut nice straight lines. And unfortunately, you know, I'm dealing with an older piece of fabric. I'm trying to work out of my scrap bin a little bit. And sometimes you just have to kind of fiddle with it. And you want your fold to be above your raw edges there, because that's not going to be a straight line, as we all know. So I'm going to pick that line on the ruler. So here I'm at the 13 1/2 on both sides. And here I'm down at the 2. And so now I feel like that's lined up and I can cut it. So sometimes you just have to kind of fiddle with it to make sure you don't end up with the unstraight line. All right, so now we're going to cut off our 0s.
And for our background pieces, we need that same 4 3/4 cut. So we're going to do the same thing. Our first step was to go to 9 1/2. So I'm going to come over here to 9 1/2. Then I would go to 19, but I don't have that much size on this piece. I'm going to take this little scrap out of the way, and I'm going to bump over to that 1/4 inch line. And now that I've done that, I'm going to come in and cut 4 1/2. And then I'm going to come over here and cut at 14. And we'll do the exact same steps to get our squares, but this time we're going to have to do the shifty ruler, we'll call it, for both. So now I'm going to open this up and I'm going to square that end. Okay, and again, if you don't shift these too much, you can continue to keep them lined up, but if you feel like they're shifting, it doesn't hurt at all to unfold it and cut them individually. So now we're going to pick a line on our ruler, make sure that we're lined up with it, and I'm actually going to lower it because my ruler interferes with that stand. And then I'm going to go ahead and just stack mine. And I'm going to use a couple of different white on white backgrounds for this quilt. So this is just part of them. I like to use up my leftovers when I can. So I'm going to pick a line on my ruler. I'm going to line up with all my pieces here. And I know from our previous measurements, if I can get over here to 19, then I'm going to get one more cut out of this section. And I may even be able to use this. I haven't done the math on that yet. So first I'm going to cut my 0. Then I'm going to cut my 9 1/2. Now I haven't cut this one yet, so I'm going to double check on my chart. Yep, I do want 19. Then I'm going to pick up this little scrap, bump my ruler over to that 1/4 inch line, line up with a line on the ruler across the bottom edge too, and then we'll cut the 4 1/2 again. 4 1/2, 14. All right, so now we've made an extra row. So each one of these I think has 6. Yes, so we've got 24 there. And this was a weird piece of fabric, so I'm not even sure that I was a true with the fabric, but I'd probably get one more cut out of each of these 3. And for the total pattern, it calls for 48. So we're halfway there. So I'll go ahead and cut another scrap piece of fabric to get us the rest of our squares, and then I will show you what our next step is. Okay, so now I've got all my fat quarters cut up. We started off with 16. So these are all my piece A's. These are all my piece B's. And these are all my PCs. And until we start talking about borders and binding, that is all we need. So the next thing I'm going to do is, okay, so there are several ways that we can do this, but the kind of beginner, straightforward way that we're wanting to do this is we're going to go from corner to corner and mark a line. And I really like these big, nice rulers to do that with. And that is what we're going to sew onto each of our piece B's. Okay? So once we do that and we've sewn it on, then we're going to trim it away 1/4 inch over. And then that leftover triangle is going to be waste. I am going to use those for something else. So I'm going to use this guide here because I can just line it up with my initial corner to corner line and draw a second line, and then I can sew here, cut between the 2 lines, and I'm going to end up with a half square triangle. So that's one of the beauties of this quick quarter ruler because it's 1/2 inch wide, so it's giving us 1/4 inch for the seam allowance on both sides. So if you look at it like this bit in the middle is where we're going to be cutting. So that'll give me 1/4 inch from this sew line and 1/4 inch from this sew line. So that is a fast and easy way to get some half square triangles out of some of these leftover pieces, and we can use that for another project. I always love a good bonus project, don't you? Okay, so we're going to roll through and we're going to do this for all 48 of our piece B's. Okay, so now that we've got all of our B's and all of our C's cut, we're going to sew all of these together. So the first thing is you want to make sure that all of your triangles with the lines drawn on them are ready to go. And you've got them all pointed the same direction. And I like to get both of my pieces lined up side by side because it's going to be important that you orient all your blocks the same way. If you look at the pattern, it has the white triangle going on the bottom corner. For whatever reason, that does not work for my brain. So I suggest you look at your pattern, you decide which way you're going to orient it, and you do it all the same. So as long as all of your points are the same way, so for me, I like to have my white corner at the top. I like to be adding my square to the top. So I'm going to flip this around so that it is oriented the right way. And then I'm going to take all of my triangles and make sure that they're oriented the right way. So this is my discard side. And then we're going to sew right sides together across our entire stack. So as long as your two pieces are oriented the same, you'll be fine. Your spirals might spin the other way, but what you don't want to do is do some this way and then switch and do some the other way, some that way. So you wouldn't want to do some this way and some this way. So as long as you make sure you're oriented the right way, and again, for me, I like to flip that pattern over. That may seem silly, but my brain wants to send this square through on top of this rectangle that direction. So I just flip my pattern over so I'm oriented the right way. So we'll head over to the machine and sew a couple of these together. So I've got my stack of my rectangles ready to go. Now, because this is not a flat piece, I want to take this 1/4 inch foot off of here. Super fast change. And then we're just going to rip through these and sew them all together. Now we only need 4 to make this first block. So feel free to make just 4 the first time so that you get a feel for how this block comes together. Sorry, I had to turn that light off for you guys. I don't even know if you knew there was a light there, but it's nice to be able to adjust it if you need to. And I've got my stitch length set to normal. I don't know, it's like a 1.75. I like to stitch a little bit shorter, I think, than most people. For the sake of having a variety of prints, I'm going to skip that other red one. We'll just get our 4 here. And I'm going to make 1 or 2 extras. Okay, that gives us a couple extras in case we want to play with color combinations. And now if you're not making the secondary half square triangles, then you don't have to do this next step, but I'm just going to sew that additional line so that I have some half square triangles. Okay, let's head back to the ironing board and we will cut these apart and then press them towards the white. Okay, so now we will go ahead and cut these apart. We've got a couple different color options. You only need 4. But I find I like to play with the colors just a little bit. So we're going to line up with our diagonal line there and just trim off that extra half square triangle. Okay, then we'll bring our ironing board back over. We're going to set the seams and press towards the white. Okay, we'll set that under the clapper for just a minute. While we're waiting on that, I will come over here and change that presser foot back. All right, so now we're going to build out our block. So these are our piece B's. We need to grab 4 piece A's. See if I can find one we haven't used yet. Okay, so these are going to be my piece A's. And I'm going to always pull right back to this pattern. And if you look at the pattern, it has our white triangles on the bottom left and our main body on the right hand side. And we're going to sew all of these together, and then we're going to press towards this half square triangle piece. Okay? So we'll run all of these because these are all going to be the same on my center block. You can definitely make these more scrappy, but I like the look of the center star being kind of well organized, and then the outer points being a little bit scrappier. So I've got my 1/4 inch guide foot on there, and we're just going to go. I did not check what I want to match that with. It's a lot of red. Okay, now we'll separate all of these, and then we're going to go press to our pieced side. We'll set all our seams. I'll put my pieced side on the top so I'm not tempted to press it the wrong way. We have a loose thread there. It's a dark one too. Okay. So we'll press them all open towards that pieced side. And this is going to come together super fast, you guys. This is a big block. It lets you show off some really big fabric, which is kind of nice. Okay, so we're going to take our block. Our left-hand side is going to point towards the middle. This side is going to point down. Then we've got another side pointing towards the middle. And this side is going to point up. Now I feel like this isn't very balanced because these both are very solid. So I'm going to at least switch these two. Only if I can do it right. Hello. Okay, so that's going to be our block. So we will sew that together. And then as we put this together on the wall, this will form a secondary diamond on each of these 4 corners. So what we're going to do is sew a seam for these 2 together and these 2 together. I am going to chain piece these two because it kind of helps me stay organized. You certainly don't have to, and feel free to pin if you would like, although we don't have any points coming together on this section. Okay, so I still have my pieces chained together here. And what I like to do is just flip one each direction so that I'll be pressing this one towards that seam and this one this way. And what that helps me do is it helps me nest my seams. So I'm just going to press basically one, each one is going to go opposite directions. And someone asked me this week about nesting seams, and so I'm going to try to show you this in great detail here. I'm going to go ahead and cut these apart so that you can really see them. But basically, when we flip these together, I've got this seam going to my right, and then this bottom seam is going to my left. So when I look at them this way, clearly they're not lined up at all. They're about an inch apart, and maybe this will show up with a darker fabric. But what I'm going to do is move those two together until they butt right up against each other. And so what you want to do is get them close, and then you kind of can like wiggle your fingers back and forth until you just feel that there is not another millimeter in there. And I almost compare it to, I know this is a silly analogy, and forgive me for my homeschool mommy things, but when you go to put crayons back in the box, like you get 24 in a box and they should all fit back in there, but they don't because they're not in the right spot. And then once you get them all in the right spot, they're kind of nesting together and they just fit in the box and it's easy. That's how a nesting seam should feel. It should feel really solid. There's no extra room at all, but it feels like it was made to go in that slot, if that makes sense. So this seam is the only one that really needs to be nested. So I made sure and I pinned on both sides of that. And then we'll go back over to the machine. So now we'll just sew down this last seam. This very last seam, we're going to go ahead and press this open. It doesn't have to nest with anything else, and that kind of keeps it from getting ultra bulky here in the center. So when you're trying to quilt it, you hopefully don't bend or break a needle. So first I'm going to press it one direction, and then I'll flip it over, and from the back I will press it open. You see how that's kind of wonky? I want to just go ahead and press it flat first, one direction. I may need to add some steam. I don't have any water left in my iron. Story of my life. I don't know. What do you guys think? I feel like the steam that comes out of the iron is better than using a spray bottle. And that's a fine mister, and it just does the tiniest bit, but I still feel like it's just, I don't know if it penetrates the fabric better or what, but I feel like it does a better job when it comes out of the iron. Okay. So now I'm just going to press that open. We'll throw a clapper on it, and we'll get it up on the design wall with our other blocks. Okay, so throw a clapper on it.
All right, so now we have all 12 of our blocks made. As you can tell, this is turning into quite a large project, but again, we just started with a few fat quarters and it's coming together really quickly. So I'm really excited about that. We're going to attach each row together, and then I'm going to press them opposite directions so that they'll nest. So I'll show you them when I get them back into their rows. Okay, now we have all 4 rows sewn together. I'm just going to come back and sew row 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, and press that, and then finally we'll sew this last section of our middle quilt together. Okay, so now our entire main body of the quilt top is together. The next thing that we have to do is to add our borders. Now on the pattern it calls for 4 3/4 inch borders, I think. If you know me, I kind of fly by the seat of my pants and I try to work out of my stash. So because my stash, I had a lot of a particular white fabric that I'm using here, I'm going to use that as my border, but I didn't have enough to do the 4 3/4. So I'm only going to cut them down to 1 3/4 of an inch. And the reason why is because I'm going to be using these leftover half square triangles and I want the dimensions to be exactly a divisible number. So you can definitely follow the pattern and just skip all the rest of this if you're not doing those half square triangles, but I'm going to do the half square triangles as an extra border across the top and the bottom, and so I wanted the width to be an exact dimension. So now I'm going to sew the 1 3/4. My brain's thinking 0.75. 1 3/4 inch border all the way around on all 4 sides. All right, that's a wrap on our fat quarter Christmas quilt. Now, of course, you could make this in any fabric. It's super fast and fun. I did add my border at the top and the bottom to make use of some of those half square triangles. If you wanted to, you could definitely go right to left. I did not have enough to go on all 4 sides. So if you had some other scraps that maybe you wanted to incorporate, that would work out as well. I just try to use everything that I can when I'm making a quilt so that it doesn't end up in my scrap bin that I have to figure out something to do with later. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed sewing this one out with me. If you do like any of these tutorials or any of my unboxing videos, it would help me out a ton if you would hit that like and subscribe button. And until then, I will see you guys next time.